So now that we have discussed the functions of the state and the fact that it has the responsibility of the citizens, so how does politics actually come into frame? Since the state is responsible for the citizens, it goes proactive. Let us discuss the case of the agricultural subsidies. Do you think India is the only one providing subsidies to the farmers? No. The rich countries also do provide subsidies. And these subsidies create what? Surplus production. And this surplus production leads to what? Depressed world prices. And who actually suffers? It is the small farmer who suffers because of the subsidy. So what are these? How are these subsidies originate? They originate from the trade policy. And who designs this trade policy is the party which is in power. And these elements of this trade policy are the ones which actually impact a business. That is the tariffs, the types of taxes which are specific, as well as an add-on tax. Today we have GST, we have goods and services tax, but earlier we used to have VAT, value added tax also. We had state taxes, we had central excise and what not. So these taxes actually create a burden on the profit margins of a business. And it is in the hands of the political party which is in power to actually increase those taxes or reduce them. The fact that they get reduced impacts the profit margin positively, they increase would adversely impact. Again, when we look at these these elements as such, some of these elements, like when they actually increase the taxes, so somewhere down the line they say that they are protecting the domestic consumers. Why? Because say for example, if you look at the Chinese products, if they are imported directly, they are very cheap. So what happens is that they actually kill the domestic producers as such. Classic case is the Indian toy market. Indian toys as such, the manufacturing had almost virtually stopped because of the onslaught of Chinese toys. It is only when the present government hiked the taxes on the same that the Indian toy market has seen a resurrection. So government payout happens via cash grants, lower interest loans, tax breaks, and definitely all these actually encourage also inefficiency also. The other instrument of the trade policy is the quota, where they actually place a restriction on the quantity that can be manufactured or imported into a country. There is also something called a voluntary export restraint, which is also governed by the political environment, where it is actually a particular ceiling is decided on the amount of quantity that can be exported outside, like the case we have seen in COVID as to the amount of vaccines or the number of quantity of vaccines which could have been given to other countries. Now, if you look at the developed world, they are also practicing these aspects, and the result is that somewhere down the line these policies also lead to something called the dumping. Now what happens is, in case of certain companies, they try to establish their supremacy by crashing the prices in the market, and that is where the trade policy comes up with the anti-dumping policy. When we look at anti-dumping, what happens is the government, when the moment the government comes to know about it, they actually levy high taxes so that the dumping does not take place. What are the political arguments for these kind of interventions? One is protection of jobs in industry, which is often heard about in UK as such. And you would see that over there the protection is very, very high, primarily because they feel that the jobs will be lost out by the onslaught of global trade. National security is the other reason, and definitely retaliation in terms of punitive sanctions. Protecting consumers is also another argument which is given in terms of ensuring that they are healthy enough. and of course protecting human rights. So when what political parties or the political governments usually do is that they actually say that they are protecting the human rights, and therefore they would actually go in for the MFN status only. So strategic trade policies as such, the government is actually using these instruments to provide industries with protection, and these protections will only benefit the domestic firms if and only they are actually subjected to, or they also innovate. Now this brings us to one point. If one political party is dominant, fine. But what happens in many cases, like for example in India, we have seen coalition politics coming in. There are many parties which actually come in and form a government. So what happens to the economic reforms? So these political parties will only take up economic reforms only and only when their survival comes at stake. Otherwise, they are likely to ensure that the economy takes a back seat. And why does it happen? What are the elements of it? Because coalition governments are large, unwieldy. It is very difficult to control them. There's factitious politics. Again, there's a lot of negotiations that actually go in while actually trying to form the elements of economic policies, and political competition is extremely high, as every party vies to be in the dominant position.